stop you here if I might.
Absolutely.
For 1 second. Now, and we'll continue that topic because you have to say a lot about it and it's all very interesting. But let me just stop you here with the input that I got from a reader of Singularity weblog when we were discussing your transition from being a vegetarian to being to abiding by the paleo diet. And basically what she said was something like bringing in the ethical dimension. Yeah, George Dvorsky began to eat animals so that he can improve his performance in the gym, basically. In other words, she was raising the point, well, maybe that can be true, but ethically speaking, nothing has changed. Those animals that are being consumed are still suffering, and so that's a very, in a way, she was raising the point that it's perhaps a very selfish way of making a decision,
right?
And kind of goes directly at the core of what animal rights are for.
Sure. A couple of things I'll say about that. One, I'm not pretending at this point to be the most ethically perfect person, and try as I might, and I've been there. There was a time in my life when, particularly when I first came into contact with Eastern philosophies and Buddhism, that I did go about my life in such a way that I tried to mete out as little suffering as possible to the universe, if you will. And it's something that still obviously is a concern of mine, but no longer do I let it, I guess, override my life and dominate my life. I have to, I guess, be balanced in the sense and be fair to myself in the sense as to how I need to live and how I want to live as well. So there, undeniably, I mean, we're all selfish and we all have a little bit of a hypocritical aspect to us. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend I'm something that I'm not. That's all. So that's how we'll start to answer that question. The second thing I will say, though, is that's kind of a very trite way of just, saying that I'm just trying to get gains at the gym, and that's, for me, it's an indicator of my overall health and strength. And like I said, it's part of my life extension strategy. So if I'm doing well at the gym, that means I'm doing well in terms of my health and wellness, and continuing to build muscle mass. I mean, these aren't petty things. To be able to, like I said, to be able to enter into your elderly years with as much muscle mass as you could muster, including also very a very high degree of bone density, because resistance training will also give you bone density much more than you had not, which will stave off obviously the effects of osteoporosis, which is a particular issue for women. So women also need to be doing resistance training. So in other words, doing well at the gym is simply, again, symptomatic or emblematic of overall health and wellness. And there's a third element I'll answer that I'll say to this question, and that is there's not all meat eaters and not all carnivores are the same, and not all of them go about meat eating in the same sort of a way. I do believe that even though it might be imperfect from the perspective of a vegetarian or a vegan or even from a Buddhist perspective. She was
vegetarian, that reader that I talked to.
I actually think I know who you're referring to, by the way, because I received almost an identical email from this person, but that's fair. The desire to be the conscious carnivore, I think, is fair, and I think you certainly have this. The vast majority of meat eaters are very careless and or even not even thoughtful in terms of where their meat comes from and the conditions with which their animal products are coming from, and that's not something that I think that I'm guilty of. I strive to be that conscious carnivore. So what that means is going to farmers markets, going to the organic food stores such as Organic Garage, which we have here, or Whole Foods, for example, and basically eating, let's say, beef from grass-fed cattle, free-range chickens, also the eggs from free-range chickens, which are so I believe I'm eating meat that came from an animal that actually had a decent life, or at least a reasonably decent life, a life that was actually worth living, not like these lives that are that are occurring in factory farms for all of these animals. That's unbelievably deplorable, and that's definitely something that has to come to an end. And a remarkable thing about the paleo community is you'll find that the vast majority of them are on board this certain idea. They're all about sustainable farming, about healthy meats, hormone-free meats, grass-fed, free-range foods. And if there's any group out there right now that's kind of leading the charge to eliminate or not, if not reduce the amount of factory farming that goes on, it's the Paleo people. And they're this. I think they may, as this kind of this idea starts to propagate, it may be responsible, I think, for a lot of different things, including again, more ethical standards at farms, the rise of more individual farms, so maybe going back to that sort of a trend, and again, what's not only is this ethical, it's also vastly improving the quality of the meats as well. So grass-fed meat is astoundingly better for you than grain-fed meat. When you're eating grain-fed meat, again, cows they're not meant to eat grain. They're meant to eat grass. So what problems that results is a preponderance of omega-6s in your body. So that throws your omega-3s and omega-6s way out of whack. It prevents your body from being able to absorb nutrients and minerals to the degree that it would had you been eating grass-fed. And also there's issues with water retention. So that's just one example of many. So that's how I look at it. Again, nothing. I'm not just blindly going into. I'm just going to start to eat meat because I want to, have a great deadlift. That's a gross oversimplification and not even remotely fair. Like anything I do in life, I weigh always the pros and cons. I weigh my own particular needs and interests and my own particular agenda, even if you will, to promote ideas of human wellness and well-being, and go about it, I think, in the most responsible and ethical way possible.
And that's why I supported you in that decision, because I know you to be a very thorough person and a very thorough researcher before you make a major decision like that, because I know how strongly committed you were before to that. And that's why first I thought, well, George must have very good reasons for doing what he did. And second of all, I respected your decision. But third of all, it really started making me think about whether I should follow your example or not. Because I have to say, I spent 10 weeks in California this summer. And many people, not only such as, Max Moore and Natasha Vita-Moore, who have been guests here previously on the show and have both talked about their paleo diets, but many other people in California are actually embracing that diet. Tim Ferriss, for example, who is not explicitly embracing the paleo diet, his recommendations are very close to it.
Yes,
very
they are.
Close to it.
Yeah.
With some exceptions such as beans and legumes and so on. My thing was that, I haven't made up my mind completely, but let me grab the example of the omega-3 fatty acids. I used to take those for years with my other supplements that I take here, multivitamins and so on, antioxidants, etc. And probably about a year ago, I developed some kind of an intolerance or something, because every time I'd take those, or either a multivitamin which contained omega-3 fatty acids, or just omega-3 fatty acids separately as they're sold by, say, New Chapter or the other ones, I'd get a headache, like a killer headache.
Wow. Okay.
And as soon as I stopped taking these, headache was gone. And I tested this on several times, as soon as I take it, and because, you take usually 3 per day or something like that, one with every meal. And usually mid to late afternoon, I started having the headaches. And the days that I excluded those, no headaches. So, and I still haven't found an explanation for that. But and I know the importance of those fatty acids. I know how crucial and vital they are for health and overall, for everything in your body. And still, the headaches are just keeping me away from
what I would recommend then, if you can't take supplements directly, just make sure you get a lot of salmon in your diet, particularly or exclusively from Pacific salmon, because there's no such thing as Atlantic salmon.
Yeah.
That's all farm fed, and that's that's very garbagey kind of food.
Yeah.
And if you can, and this can be an issue of affordability, eat the grass-fed beef, because it's going to it's not going to throw your omega-6 ratio off. So those are things that you could do without having to resort to supplementation.
Yeah, those are things that I do have in mind, but both the Pacific and the grass-fed are kind of
I know.
high-budget items.
Yeah.
And as someone who is like full-time blogging without really any serious income, that's a little
And you bring up a fair point, and it's an issue for me as well, is the affordability of all this. It's not cheap to eat healthily. And it's one of the most frustrating things you discover when you really focus on being a foodie and eating healthily. It's like, man, these grocery bills are through the roof. Yeah. And that's part of the problem. It's part of the whole fast food culture that we live in. And it's what's caused the whole, factory farming problem as it is. So I'm not sure what to even suggest by in terms of maybe just simply prioritizing where you spend your money and realizing, well, maybe health is so important to you, you will in fact find the ways to budget for those types of foods.
So I have two more questions on that sort of line of conversation. So the first one is, what about the environmental dimensions? I mean, the idea goes that, if you are a vegan, you're consuming somewhere between 4 or 8 times less of the resources associated with your food production, depending on what references you read. And therefore, you're putting less stress on the planet and the environment in general. What about those?
Again, I think vegans shouldn't kid themselves about the environmental impact of non-meat-based diets. I think the jury is still out on that. I mean, every diet is going to cause a certain degree of suffering and a certain degree of degradation to the environment. I think it's a matter of degrees. Don't get me wrong. I think that factory farming for meat is definitely the major culprit and is definitely causing more of a problem than, let's say, non-meat-based agriculture. But we're still talking about two evils, if you will. There's no perfect way around it. Our presence here on this planet as human beings is going to cause stress to the planet, which is, unless, of course, which gets now the second part of the answer. Again, I want to stress the fact that we are talking about new models of agriculture and the whole issue of sustainable farming. Mm-hmm. So basically moving to smaller venues and working within systems where there's a kind of ecological soundness to them. And I saw one remarkable model where it was a small-scale farm. And the first stage was basically, well, actually, they asked the farmer, what are you actually a farmer of? Because he had a bunch of different things on his farm. He says, actually, primarily speaking, I'm a grass farmer. And the journalist couldn't really quite understand it until they got in there and actually saw what he was actually talking about. And what he did is he set aside a certain part of the pasture there to grow grass to make sure that it was vibrant and lush. And only until it reached a certain stage did he let the cows go in there, and the cows, of course, did their thing and they ate all the grass. So which is obviously a good part of that. But at the same time, they dropped their dung onto the fields, and once they were kind of done there, he moved them out to a different area, and he let the dung and all the kind of the waste products that were left there just kind of fester. And after a few days, what ends up happening is you get maggots and grubs and all these different bugs, at which point he let the chickens in there and they go to town. Also, the timing is crucial because if you wait too long, then you're going to have flies and all these other insects around there. Mm-hmm. So then you have the chickens go in there and they go to town on all the grubs and the worms and all the things that are actually a natural part of their diet. That's what a chicken should be eating. Mm-hmm. And similarly, also it's going to produce a chicken that tastes fantastic and produce eggs that taste fantastic and actually have color to the yolk and have all the beneficial qualities that you would want.
The dark yolks, yeah.
Yeah, and then similarly, once that, of course, now the chickens, of course, are also adding their waste products to that particular area, but that in turn is going to add the sulfur and other attributes that's now going to grow the grass again. And now you see we have this cycle, and this is the model that we need to move to. And you've got meat being produced here, and arguably you can say that even this same farm can also similarly produce vegetables and fruits depending on the model and how this particular farmer wants to do it. While it sounds great on paper, and certainly we're moving more towards this sort of a model, and I would like to support it, the only issue about it is what will this do to food prices down the line? And the experts that I'm hearing are saying, well, it's going to result in higher food prices, and that's why I think that there's going to have to be a sea change, I think, in society. That right now I think we're getting used to the fact that food is so cheap, but we're paying some awful prices for that cheapness, both in terms of our health and what the impact is on our environment. And if we want to have both of those things, optimal, then we're going to have to pay a little bit more for that, and maybe less on things like our iPhones and iPads and all the materialistic luxuries that we're similarly accustomed to and have as equally prioritized in our lives.
Mm-hmm.